Let's dive right into this explainer and trace the intense, rapid-fire chain reaction of events that completely redefined India's future. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating set of historical source notes that map out a highly volatile window of time, 1933 to 1941. It's a period where literally every single decision triggered a massive consequence.
So, you have to ask yourself, how did a mere 8 years change the entire trajectory of the Indian independence movement? When you look at the sequence of events recorded in these notes, you realize pretty quickly that history isn't just some random list of dates. It's really more like a series of collapsing dominoes, where one ideological shift or legislative act forces the very next move.
We've got a clear roadmap for this. First, shifts in political strategy, then the 1935 Government Act, elections and rising tensions, the World War II crisis, the two-nation theory, and finally, the individual Satyagraha. Let's get into it.
Starting with Part 1, Shifts in Political Strategy. Let's look at a massive pivot in 1933 that completely destabilized expectations and fractured the political strategy of the Indian National Congress.
So, Gandhi's shift from civil disobedience to social reform against untouchability created this huge vacuum, which actually led to new socialist factions forming right inside the Congress. Our source notes detail that upon his release from jail in 1933, Gandhi basically dedicated himself entirely to this cause. He coined the term Harijan, started the Harijan Sevak Sangh, and even launched a weekly English newspaper. Then by 1934, right after a massive earthquake in Bihar, he officially ended the civil disobedience movement altogether. And in response to this major ideological pivot, figures like J.P. Narayan, Narendra Dev, and A. Patwardhan stepped up and established the Congress Socialist Party to implement a socialist program directly within the INC.
Now, this ideological clash really reached a boiling point. Subhash Chandra Bose openly demanded a new objective and new leadership for the Congress, bluntly calling Gandhi's suspension of the movement a failed leadership. This internal friction was a glaring, flashing signal that the unified front was starting to fracture over exactly how to actually achieve freedom.
Moving on to Section 2, the 1935 Government Act. This internal friction perfectly set the stage for the British to attempt a major institutional compromise. Based on the 3 roundtable conferences and the Simon Commission report, the Government of India Act 1935 heavily restructured power. It granted provincial autonomy by abolishing diarchy in the provinces, but, and here's the catch, in a very calculated move, it introduced that exact same divided rule at the center. It separated powers into federal, provincial, and concurrent lists, yet kept the ultimate residuary powers firmly tucked away in the hands of the viceroy. On top of that, it expanded separate electorates to include women and labor unions and established a federal court in Delhi. The really crucial takeaway here is that this act created 2 brand new provinces, Sindh and the Northwestern Frontier Province. That brought the total to exactly 11 provinces, 9 existing plus 2 new equals 11. And that number perfectly tees up our next phase, the electoral battlefield.
Which brings us to Section 3, Elections and Rising Tensions. The 1935 Act directly triggered the pivotal 1937 elections, where the political battle lines were officially drawn in ink.
When the dust finally settled, the results were absolutely staggering. The Indian National Congress just dominated, winning 8 out of those 11 seats, missing out only in Punjab, Sindh, and Bengal. The Muslim League, on the other hand, secured 0 seats. They even lost out to regional parties among Muslim voters. As you can imagine, this prompted a massive strategic recalculation for them.
Muhammad Ali Jinnah actually approached Congress leaders to form a coalition, but on the condition that Muslim members in the council would be nominated by the League, while Congress refused. So when Congress rejected Jinnah's proposal, the Muslim League retaliated by heavily propagating the Hindu Raj slogan. Objectively, this marked a severe escalation in communal friction. The League launched a major campaign claiming that under this supposed Hindu Raj, the interests of Muslims were simply not safe.
Now, while Congress was focusing on social welfare and civil rights, communalism was simultaneously deepening on the ground. Between 1937 and 1939, the Congress government actually achieved some pretty significant work: prison reform, sanitation, promoting khadi, lifting bans on the Hindustan Seva Dal, and removing books from blacklists to ensure press freedom. But right alongside those civic reforms, groups like the Hindu Mahasabha and RSS initiated the Gau Raksha movement, and the source notes clearly indicate this further amplified communalism across the board.
Section 4.
the World War II crisis. Just as all these domestic tensions were peaking, a massive global shockwave arrived in 1939, forcing everyone's hand.
The outbreak of World War II drew hard lines. Interestingly, our source notes literally refer to them as the excess powers, meaning Germany, Italy, and Japan facing off against the elite powers, Britain, France, the USA, and the USSR. This catastrophic global conflict forced Indian leaders to immediately evaluate their positions on a war that was being fought across multiple continents.
And this crisis completely fractured the Indian leadership into three very distinct camps. Gandhi favored the West, arguing that the democratic system, flawed as it was vastly superior to totalitarian Nazis. Bose vehemently disagreed. He argued for zero support to either side and wanted to leverage this exact moment to launch a mass movement for independence. Gandhi rejected that, feeling it indirectly supported Nazi forces. Then you have Nehru, who settled on a third option, no support to either party, but also no mass movement. But then, Viceroy Linlithgow made a move that acted as the ultimate domino. He completely bypassed the Congress and unilaterally declared India a party to the war. In unified protest, the entire INC government resigned from all those hard-won provincial seats. It was a massive statement. And it's an event that, our source notes tell us, the Muslim League enthusiastically celebrated as a day of deliverance on December 22, 1939.
Let's look at Section 5, the two-nation theory. The political vacuum left by those Congress resignations gave the Muslim League the perfect opening to push their ultimate objective.
At the 1940 Lahore session, the Pakistan proposal was presented by Fazlul Huq, which fundamentally hardened the political and communal boundaries from that point forward. Presided over by Jinnah, this session birthed the explicit assertion that Hindus and Muslims were not just two religions sharing a geography, but two entirely distinct nations. Now, even though the actual word Pakistan wasn't used in the proposal itself, the structural demand was permanently set in stone.
By this point, Britain was getting desperate for Indian support after Hitler's early successes in Western Europe, so they offered the August Proposal, also known as the Linlithgow Formula. This explicitly offered dominion status for the first time after the war, and an assembly constituted mainly by Indians. But, and this is a huge but, it gave minorities a massive constitutional veto. It explicitly stated no constitution would be acceptable to the British if it wasn't acceptable to the minority. Think about the power dynamic that created. It was a complete constitutional roadblock.
Naturally, the Muslim League welcomed this veto power, seeing partition as the only viable solution. But Nehru? He bluntly rejected the proposal, famously calling it as dead as a doornail. By rejecting the August proposal so completely, Congress basically ensured the constitutional deadlock remained totally unbroken. The British offer was just seen as laden with unacceptable caveats.
Which brings us to our final section, the individual Satyagraha. With the August proposal dead, Congress needed a brand new strategy, one that wouldn't inadvertently help Nazi forces on the global stage.
Also known as the Dili Chalo or Jail Baro movement, this was a highly controlled, sequential protest initiated by Gandhi starting in October 1940. It was profoundly methodical. It wasn't some chaotic mob. It was a deliberate, orderly line. Vinoba Bhave was chosen as the very first Satyagrahi. Jawaharlal Nehru stepped up as the second, and Brahmadutt as the third. By 1941, Gandhi actually formally declared Nehru his successor right in the middle of this calculated act of defiance.
And despite being an individual rather than a mass movement, the sheer scale of it was staggering, resulting in around 25,000 Indian arrests. Just put that into perspective. That is a breathtaking number of people methodically stepping forward, one by one, intentionally getting arrested just to make a unified point.
So, I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder. The source notes state explicitly that the objective of this Satyagraha was not actually the demand for immediate independence, but rather for the freedom of expression. How does this highly calculated demand for expression perfectly set the stage for the final battles to come? It really shows a leadership playing a deeply strategic long game, carefully preparing the ground for the massive movements that would ultimately secure their future. Thanks for diving into this incredible timeline with me today. Keep asking questions and keep learning.